Great. Hello, beautiful people. Welcome to this week's episode of the Montpelier Happy Hour here on WVEW LP Brattleboro, your community radio station. And I'm your host and producer, Olga Peters. This is the show where we talk about how everything in Montpelier shakes out for the rest of us. And I am so happy to have back to the show your three of the new reps. We had a couple others in Windham County, but Emily Karras Duncan from Windham 6. Hi, Emily.
Hi.
And Windham 6 is Wilmington, Whitingham, Halifax. Zon Eastis from Windham 1, which is Guilford and Vernon. Hi, Zon. And then
Morning.
Ian Goodnow, Windham 9, which is Brattleboro, which I always think is kind of like part of downtown and then like north of Route 9, Route 30, sort of like that.
Yep, basically all of beautiful downtown Brattleboro, from the Whetstone up, and then all of Putney Road to the town line, and then out Route 9 to right after the 91 bridge.
I was looking at the map this morning on the website for the state where they do your districts, and it's such a good reminder. I forget how big, like land wise, so many of our towns are, even if the population's not that big.
Yeah,
And so, like Brattleboro, I'm like, oh, I forgot it goes up all that way.
yeah, yeah. We're rural too.
Parts of it, yes. So, I'm happy to have you folks here today because I feel you're in such an interesting place as lawmakers because you have gone through your first session. So, you definitely have experience under your belt, and yet you're still new enough that a lot of things probably aren't just like, well, that's how it's done. There's parts of you that I'm guessing are still asking questions about the state house and how things work. And I hope you're all taking journals because I bet it's a fascinating time for you. Um, I'd love to hear from you all. You know, is that where you feel you are in your stage as lawmakers, or are you like, oh, Olga, we still got this in the bag, like we got it?
Would say not.
Emily, would you like to start first? Like, what was your biggest reality check between what you thought you were going to experience and what actually happened?
I guess when I was going in, it was hard to have particular expectations because I had no idea how it was all going to shake out. But I would say two of the main things that I take away are like part of the reason why I wanted to go in there was also to find areas of agreement with folks across the aisle. And it was really great to be able to find that and to be able to like work productively together. I think especially the freshman class kind of came in being like, hey, we are here to work together for Vermont, and that is our purpose. And I think we did a pretty good job of keeping well focused and aligned on that.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing for me is parliamentary procedure, which is a very, very like deep subject in and of itself. That you have to immediately apply when you're there. So I'm excited to learn more about it.
Yeah. Did you all get primers on parliamentary procedure? Because it's like, to me, it's very, like you said, it's very deep and it's got all these layers.
Yeah, we got primers, but it's the subject that you got to live with for a while.
Yeah,
I
I would
see
say that
Zon and Ian nodding. Yeah.
I think I would say that even though you might have a sense of what's going on, it doesn't quite work, and you don't really get it until you're actually doing it. And then you see, oh, I see. This is why, this is how, this is what. And it starts to make more sense. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And
Ian.
probably every week some new thing would happen on the floor that involved some element of Mason's rules, which are the rules that govern the legislative floor. And you'd be like, oh, well, I have no idea what's going on. Um, and also that it's very different than or not very, but it's different than Robert's rules, which I think a lot of Vermonters have maybe had some experience with if they've kind of interacted with like a select board or any small municipal body. And so like having had that experience here in Brattleboro, but then going up to the legislature and realizing that, yeah, it's like governed by a whole different set of rules and tradition. That's another thing too. And sort of slowly peeling back the layers of the tradition that exists and governs part of the operation there.
I can imagine that's an interesting mix.
Yeah.
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 So, Zon and Ian, I'd love to hear from both of you. What were your biggest reality checks?
I'll just jump in and say, as Emily was talking, I was thinking about it, and I agree with Emily, the things she said. But I think one of the things that I really came to appreciate, actually, two things. One is the incredible depth of the committee work. Each of us is placed onto a committee, and it's remarkable how thorough and careful and how much time you spend with your committee. I mean, 5, 6, 7 hours a day. Sometimes you're with the committee working on bills or potential bills or ideas about legislation. Lots and lots of testimony, listening to Vermonters speak about issues that matter to them. So that was really amazing. I think the other big thing for me, and I mean, I knew I was going to have to get the hang of this, but I'm really grateful to really find out how to trust that these big processes are going forward, and that I can't possibly know everything that, or even a little bit of what I really need to know, because it's an organism. It's a big, huge process, and letting that move forward and being part of it at the same time is a very interesting and actually inspiring kind of balance for me.
Mm, thank you,
Hmm.
Ian.
Yeah, I think my reality check definitely came in the committee work and at the speed in which things move. Um, I was really struck quickly by the committee process and um, a word or two would change in a proposed bill that we were considering, and we take a little testimony on it, and then that language would move forward and go and ultimately be in the final thing that we would vote out to the floor. And that could happen like that. And it
Mm,
was just incredible to sort of see how the ship is shifts and moves in its path, and just little nudges that different legislators can give it to get it to go in the direction they want it, and how subtle and quickly that all happens. And I sort of saw that. Not, I wasn't participating because I don't know what I'm doing, but I was watching it happen, and it was like really struck by that. That was a big. So I sort of thought, oh, these big, this legislation, all these statutes that I spend time in as an attorney, like they must take a really long time for any kind of language to shift or change. And at least on the committee level, sometimes it can happen really quickly. That was
mm.
wild.
And
And then,
yes, we forget. We always think of laws happening on the floor, like that's where all the action is. And yes, that's where all the final decisions are made. But the committee work is really where things get done. And so, for listeners, just so everyone knows, Emily served on the House Committee on Commerce and Economic Development. Zon was Human Services, and Ian served on the House Committee of the Judiciary, which is a very hard word to say at 8 something in the morning.
oh, just to jump
Well,
in real quick, those word changes, the commas, there can be a lot of hemming and hawing over word changes and commas, and that's honestly where the rubber meets the road quite often.
yeah.
I can imagine because, shall do doesn't sound like a big difference to us between might do or will do, but they
Mhm.
have very different connotations in law, I can imagine.
Yeah.
So, Ian, since you work in law, what was watching that language process like for you? Um, was it comfortable or was it completely different from your day job?
Oh, I think it was kind of terrifying. Uh, yeah, where on the other side, when you're working on the other side of it, you sort of, at least, and maybe it's because I'm also a new attorney, that I kind of these laws feel very set in stone.
Hmm.
Most of the time I'm looking online, but like we also have green books, like the statutes in book. They're in books. They feel very final. And so just sort of seeing the process in which a statute can change, and that can be, yeah, it was, I was like, I think I was a little awestruck, maybe is a better word for it. Just that yeah, we really, the legislature, this part of government does real work. And it was really powerful to see statutes change during this session, in a positive way in response to constituents across the state. And I saw that happen a couple of times at least in my committee work, and I'm certain that it happened in many committees across the board. And that's really powerful, and that's part of why I wanted to get into this work. So
Mm.
yeah.
Well, it's interesting. I appreciate what you said, Ian, and I do think a lot of bill work is, for lack of a better term, kind of left-brained.
Mhm.
There's the intro, there's the structure to it, there's all the boxes you need to tick to make sure it's legal, that type of thing. But I'm curious for Emily and Zon, because I know you tend to be in your day life a little bit more on the artistic, creative side of of the spectrum. Was there a creative process for either of you, or is building a is the committee work and building a final bill just a very kind of like administrative, straightforward thing? Like, I don't know. I'm curious from someone who does this in their day, what that process was like.
Um, well, I would say both Slan and I run organizations in the arts as part of what we do. And also, I think just being a practicing artist, you're a freelance worker, often you have to deal with your own administration. So it, in some ways, is like a standard life American practice, right? So I think there you go into it with that. But I would say actually the process of lawmaking is a creative practice for me. I do a lot of research in my creative practice in general. So this was like going to grad school for Vermont, and I love like learning so much about the various issues that affect Vermont. So it reminded me a lot of my work in that. And then also, especially being on commerce and economic development, we deal with the arts community. We deal with in terms of small business development, but also in terms of just sort of, I'll say, like soft power, the soft cultural power that Vermont has. Um, and that all of that, the funding, various programs that runs through our legislature. So there is there is a very interesting kind of creative component to the work that we do.
I love that, going to grad school for Vermont. I think that's that's brilliant, Emily, in a beautiful little nutshell. Yeah,
Yeah,
thank you.
yeah, absolutely. I think what I would say, Emily says it very well, of course. I think what I might suggest is that the the way my brain works and the way that I work when I'm in the world that I'm in, I found myself sort of approaching the problems and the issues that we would be addressing on the Human Services Committee. I tend to approach them in a kind of global, big stroke sort of way, whereas I saw a lot of people on the committee could be very just kind of note by note by note by note. And so I found myself maybe one of the voices that would sort of organize or reorganize things to make somehow a different kind of visual sense or a different kind of mental sense or something. So in that way, I was able to bring my own practice right into the legislating.
Hmm. And one thing I find very fascinating about laws in general is that they're meant to cover, the whole population.
Mm.
And yet, sometimes what's true for the aggregate may not be true for the individual. And so there always seems to be this balancing act, I feel, in lawmaking between the individual and the group. And I'm curious for you, I guess this is for all of you sort of a question about representation, because you go there and you have your districts, so you are meant to represent them. Um, and yet your laws that you create will impact the entire state. And you hear testimony from people, but we know it's not perfect. Like,
Mm.
as much as we want everyone at the table, not everyone can make it to the table. So
Mm.
for you, I'd love to hear like how what you sit with when you are thinking about the final, I guess, impacts of your work.
Mm.
Hmm.
Well, I'll jump in quickly.
Take it, Todd.
As, as you were talking, Olga, my brain was running right to the education bill, the H454, in the sense, and just watching that process move with all the different voices and all the different districts and all the different ways in which we each were moving and making the final decision to go forward or not. It's fascinating because my the district that I serve, Vernon and Guilford, has some very specific interests regarding education going forward. Vernon has a particular relationship to the rest of the state
Mhm.
uh, regarding education.
And
Um,
that would be around the issues of school choice.
yes, and
Yeah.
the issues that were put into statute back when Vermont Yankee appeared.
Oh, that's right.
So
Yeah.
those kinds of things were part of this big discussion. And it's also true that there are, both communities have changed a lot since those statutes were first put in place. And so it was interesting for me to listen to people in the district speak about the issue. There's a lot of very strong feeling in lots of different ways, very individual, very focused feelings for not only in my district, but I was aware of it all across the state. So that I think it was one of the richest conversations I've ever seen around an issue. I was amazed at how many different points of view there were and how many different points of view were sort of moved and adjusted. And then finally, in the final vote, I feel like it was a real representation of how strong the issue remains in Vermont. And I'm glad that the legislation, even as it's going forward, I'm very glad that the legislation is full of all sorts of contingencies and studies and further developments and timelines that will allow us to continue this discussion, that it's not just done a certain way right now coming down, but it's really still a developmental process. And I'm really excited for that.
Hmm. Emily or Ian?
I can take it, Emily. You want me to?
Go ahead.
I think, Olga, my answer to this question is that I am still working on my answer to this question.
Uh,
I
Okay.
think that this is one of the places where I really feel my freshmanness of being a legislator. The balance of representing your community and your constituents while also recognizing that there needs to be an understanding and work towards the greater good of the state.
Hmm.
And that, rising tides raises all boats that like if you're working towards a healthier Vermont, that will hopefully inherently help your community. And so I think that you can work in a way where you're holding both. Uh, but boy, struggled with it and continue to. And I think I don't know if there's really a perfect way to do it. I think
Hmm.
that, and I would imagine that you probably shift in your rationale and your reasoning on how you accomplish this with every issue, depending on what it is and how it impacts your community. But I hold very closely something that a legislator told me very early on, which was it can be very easy to kind of fall into the trap of wanting to please or like work with the other representatives that are up there and help them and listen to what they want. But just remember, not a single one of them voted for you.
That's a good
And I
bit of
just
advice.
and I think a lot about that, and I think that's really a very real, and having now done one session, I totally get that. I totally get that feeling, and I thought a lot about it, so I guess that's my non-answer for you.
Well, that's
Emily.
good.
Definitely, definitely hear that. Yeah, I would also say that I so I mean for me representation is like a pretty broad spectrum thing. It's definitely localized, but as a Black queer person, it is also like specified in
Hmm.
certain ways. So, but I also very much in the actual application of doing the job also struggled with what Ian was talking about too. It's like, how do you hold all of these things in place? And I think what I'm slowly coming to is kind of a focus on the customer service side of things and the actual relationship of the public to the government. I was actually thinking about this morning before we hopped on, was like we on the one hand have this very kind of paternalistic patriarchal relationship, but we also are in an equalized partnership as taxpayers.
Right.
And so how do we square that particular circle? Um, is something that I think about, and especially for so I'll take it to data privacy. So that's one of those issues that was kind of a large like aggregate, like let's try to develop laws that can allow business to function in the modern society, but also protects our youth. And when we were able to get that over the line, which was like a major effort of actually of all of our committees, um, that I looked at that as being something that adds extra layers of protection for queer youth, for kids of color, for marginalized, for vulnerable youth in general. So I think for the youth that are on the margins, that's going to have a really large, vast impact. For the rest of us, that'll also continue to have a sort of generalized impact too. Um, but we don't always get issues that are that easy. So finding the balance for representation is always something that I keep thinking about. I have in mind both for my constituents, and my constituents are a diverse set of constituents. So I think about that a lot.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you are all holding a lot of experiences and a lot of impacts, consequences when you are doing this work.
Hmm.
Any thoughts on, I always ask myself, you know, how can we help people access their government better and easier so that more voices are heard? And I'm curious, any thoughts now that you've kind of gone through this experience, you're like, wow, I really wish we did X different, or I really think this part is working well. I don't know, any thoughts?
Hmm.
I think some of the tough stuff for me is just by nature of the work, the timeline that we're on. And this is certainly no insult to any of our experts, but it is tough because you end up with a pretty concentrated group of people that come and interface with us.
Mm-hmm.
And, as a citizen before I came here, I always wanted a people's lobby.
Yeah.
Like there's some sort of something where like, folks can get heard. But at the same time, I would say having lived in other states, the access that you have to your representation here is pretty impressive. Because when I lived in New York, I couldn't even find a block captain. I had no idea like who I would contact for anything really. And I was like a pretty active organizer. But being in Vermont, you can get the phone number or email, and people definitely don't hesitate to email us,
Yeah.
which is something that I'm very grateful for.
Thank you, Emily. It's on.
I would say that I agree. I agree with Emily in the sense that I think that it is very representative, and I feel like people who do want to speak to me can and do. Although I would say that I'm struck by the fact that we're about as far from Montpelier as you could get, we three representing, and uh, I believe or I feel like the closer you are to Montpelier, the more in touch, the more activated citizens are. There's a
Mm,
way that it feels out where we're just more distant, and it just feels more distant. So people don't feel that maybe they're some of what I feel is that perhaps people feel like their opinions, their values, their concerns aren't going to make a difference or don't really matter in some way. And so I, I would just encourage people to reach out to us. I think that we are available, and I think that it's been my experience agreeing with both of these wonderful folks that I think this freshman class is really making a difference in the approachability and the approach to looking at legislation. And I think that if there ever is an opportunity for the state of Vermont to feel like it could get its hands wrapped around government, this would be a good time to do it because there are a lot of people who are listening very intently, I think. And that's not a hard at all judgment or statement about earlier classes of legislators.
mm,
It's just that this class, by the nature of it, is just more balanced than some of the other classes have been in the past. And I think we've made a kind of conscious agreement, an effort to really try to be inclusive and representative across
mhm.
the board.
Zahn's just throwing everybody else under the bus.
It's really all about freshmen.
I mean, we're the best.
Yes, you all
We
need
do have a
matching
lot of pride.
t-shirts. What's that,
We do
Emily?
have, we have a lot of pride.
Yes,
Yeah.
that is good. We like that. Um,
Wait, can I answer the question too?
yes, please.
Very specific for me. Because of COVID, the entire sort of legislative government moved way more technically online than it ever was before. And one of the benefits of that has been the ability to testify remotely in
Mm,
committee. And one of the things that we could do a lot better, in my opinion, is push the message out to the greater Vermont, people that you can come and testify remotely on any issue as just a citizen, who has any kind of experience or thought on an issue and could share their experience with the legislators who are on that committee. There's so much power in being able to speak to the committee members who are considering some type of legislation if you have some knowledge or experience or lived experience about it. And it does happen, but I think that we could do a much better job of like pushing that out to encourage people because it's very intimidating
mm,
to come and sit and have all these people looking at you and everything. And but with the Zoom technology that we use so well, it's like almost seamless now. We really could get a lot more people, I think. And that would be something that I'm going to try to work on a little bit is encourage some of my constituents to join me in committee if there's an issue that they're passionate about or have experience on, so that their voice can be heard, that's my one.
thank you. Well, Ian Goodnow, Zon Eastis, and Emily Karras Duncan, we will be right back after we hear from some underwriters. Welcome back to the second half of the Montpelier Happy Hour here on WVEW LP Brattleboro. If you're just joining us, I'm your host, Olga Peters, and I'm speaking with three representatives from Windham County, Emily Karras Duncan, Zon Eastis, and Ian Goodnow. And we're talking about, what's it like to have gone through your first session and now you're out on the other side. And I'm sure you're feeling all very grown up and authoritative, right? No, maybe. I just
Not
got,
quite.
for those who aren't watching the YouTube video, I just sort of got some deer in the headlights moments there from folks. Before we jump into the conversation, I just want to thank BCTV for taking the video version of this show, sharing it with media centers around the state, as well as reminding people that the views and opinions of everyone on the Montpelier Happy Hour belong to the host and the guests and no one else. That's it. We will take our own lumps on our own opinions. You can always send an email to the Montpelier Happy Hour at gmail.com. And so jumping back into the conversation, I have to say, I thank you three so much, because even when we were breaking between underwriter spots, just the wealth of conversation and the wealth of your thoughts and your take on things is just very inspiring. And I feel very blessed to live in a state where we are far from perfect, but there's just a lot of caring people thinking about some of these tough issues. And I like being a reporter here because of that. I feel like I'm always learning
Okay.
and finding new things. So thank you for being here today. Um, bef- One quick thing before we jump in, I have to say, Zahn and Ian are doing a fun podcast. So I hear it's called the Zip Podcast, the Zahn Ian podcast. Right to the point, right? Quickly, share a little bit about this podcast and where can people find it?
Zahn, your name comes first on it, so you have to talk.
Okay. There you go.
He
With
wasn't even subtle about
yeah.
whapping that ball into your court, was he, Zahn?
Well, with a Z name, I don't very often get to go first. So thank you. No, the point is that Ian and I happen to be seatmates in the house. When there are 150 of us sitting in the room, but the room is organized that you have one person that you sit closer to than anyone else, and that's your seatmate. So Ian and I got put on the first day, kind of a surprise, and we have hit it off in a certain way, and so we decided that it would be fun to and informative, I hope, to share our experience as new legislators, what the processes we're going through. And so we put, what do we do, Ian? I guess we do a different episode about every 2 weeks. We just did 2 or 3 weeks. We just did episode 3.
Yeah.
It's produced by BCTV.
Very cool.
Donnie Gifford of BCTV is the host for us, and folks can find it at BCTV or wherever you find your podcasts.
And it's recorded too, so you watch it on YouTube.
Well, and I'm so glad you brought that up. We should remind folks that BCTV does have the capacity to do podcasts. So if you are out there in the world and really want to do a podcast and you're in BCTV's area, you can reach out to them.
They're very helpful, very supportive. So that's great.
Okay, so the Zip podcast on BCTV. All right, I'm gonna have to check it out. I haven't. This is the first time I learned about it, so I can't wait to hear what you folks are talking about.
It'd be great to get your expert opinion, Olga.
Yes, please. You should just throw us some feedback, Olga. Tell us all the things that we're doing wrong.
Oh, yeah, I did tell you folks before we started that I Am by the Seat of My Pants podcast is really what the name of this podcast should be. So I don't know. But no, I look forward to checking it out. Emily, you mentioned in the first half talking about the data privacy bill that your committee worked on. What are some of the highlights of that bill that folks should know about?
Yeah, so we passed S69, I think it's X 68, I think. But it is our kids code, the youth data privacy bill. We wanted, well, the idea with this one is not necessarily to deal with the content, particularly on social media sites or any other website. It's about dealing with the addictive controls, the endless scrolling, the constant pinging of notifications, the also the sort of industry solution has been to put all of these these tools on the user and on the parents when they know that they are creating things that are highly addictive, literally um, using tools from like the gambling world to create more addictive products. So we're interested in
Oh dear, Emily has
Oh,
frozen.
Oh dear. Mm.
While she is hopefully becoming unfrozen in good old Vermont world of internet, um, can we quickly go to the education bill, and then when Emily comes back on, we'll let her finish.
it's the first time I've ever heard, can we quickly do the education bill?
I know when the words came out of my mouth, I'm
Okay,
like, yeah,
Zon,
that's not going
Zon,
to
quick,
happen.
quick, just quickly, just go through that. Sorry.
It's a big one. It's really a big one, yeah.
Well,
Yeah,
and it's one that when I've had lawmakers on, it even if they weren't on the ed committee, even if they did not directly work on this bill, it is something that they really sat with
yeah,
before they
Oh yeah,
voted yay or nay on it.
yeah.
yeah.
I'll
For
take.
instance, go
Oh, go
ahead,
ahead, Zon.
Ian.
No, no, Zon, go
Well,
ahead, please.
I'll just say that just along those lines, Olga, I attended a weekly learning session, bipartisan learning session that started the second we were elected, and so I was going, just there's so much to learn, and so it was fascinating. And then there was so much debate in the House. There was even though the committees in our caucus meetings and we had even bipartisan caucus meetings or tripartisan caucus meeting. What are they? Caucus of the whole, I guess it was called, where we were just constantly being educated about what the ups and downs, the possibilities, and we were also responding to Governor Scott's proposal
Mm.
through all of this. So that was part of the process, the learning process as well. Go, Ian.
Yeah, I would say just building off that, Zon, like basically this was a master class in both a massive transformative piece of legislation that does not come around every biennium, on top of real complex procedural and sort of like inter-House Senate politics, and on top of that, executive to legislative politics, all of that on top of an incredibly complex issue, right?
Mhm.
Like
That everyone has
trying
feelings about.
that everyone has a feeling about. So like not even getting into the specifics of exactly what the bill is, that like that's the framework of a especially for like a new legislator like walking into that. It's like learning the complexity of just the existing system, let alone what we're trying to accomplish in this big transformative bill, let alone understanding how that is operating within all of those complex political and procedural nets that are happening, and all of that happening at once was one of the reasons why it was the longest legislative session,
Mhm.
that we've had. Right? It's like it went so long because we were trying to accomplish so much. But I see Emily's back, so I'll shut up.
Yes. So thank
sorry.
you. So sorry, Emily is back, and we're sorry we lost you there for a minute. So we'd love to hear just sort of your thoughts on the data privacy bill before you got knocked
Oh,
off the internet, and then we'll go back to the ed bill. Thanks for bearing with
yeah.
us, listeners.
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, so we looked at the addictive design features, and the biggest thing that we were able to get through is the private right of action in this bill, which will allow individuals that are harmed the ability to actually sue for damages, which is a critical part of actually giving the bill teeth and trying to move the industry forward with better, more responsible practices.
Hmm. Thank you for bringing that part up because Senator Wendy,
Harrison.
thank
Harrison?
you, Zon, um, was on the show a few weeks ago and talked about this bill, but we really focused on the safety aspects
Mhm.
rather than sort of the addictive aspects of social media. So thank you for bringing that up. She hadn't mentioned that. Um, For you, what was it like balancing, you've got so much corporate pressure from these social media companies versus um, the needs of young people? Like,
I mean, it
after
was
I asked that
pretty,
question, I'm kind of like, mm.
yeah. I mean, I luckily didn't receive the most amount of pressure. So, and for me, it just is such a clear issue that I could not be easily dissuaded.
Mhm. Thank you. Anything else in that bill you wanted to highlight? One
Yeah,
second.
yeah, I would maybe one more thing just to say what Emily just said, that she wasn't party to lots of pressure.
Mm,
I think that that's one of the gifts, actually, as a freshman, that we probably weren't approached by the big pushers in a big way, and those relationships that have developed over time with some of the longer standing legislators, with lobbyists and so forth. They sort of have a shape and a frame. And so I'm really grateful that someone like Emily, for instance, was there, sort of just working out of her own experience and working out from her own community to
Yeah.
craft and make this thing very sensible. And I think that I don't want to belittle at all the non-experienced point of view, because it really, I think, made a difference in this point of view. It helped me see how just completely practical they were being, and how sensible and safe and protective they were being about Vermonters. And that's a very different thing than what we might have heard if it had been coming through the voice of heavily lobbied legislators. You see what I'm saying? So,
yeah.
Emily, I just want to say thank you.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. I mean, I think that there is a an industry argument that says that this is anti-business. And my view on that as a person who runs a business is that it's only anti-business insofar as you've created these frameworks.
Exactly. Yeah.
So,
Hmm.
if that's the case, then maybe we can change some of these frameworks.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Interesting. Well, what I find interesting about the conversation, I don't know if you came up against this in your committee work, is also the as the First Amendment, versus censorship
Mhm.
conversation. And as someone who it's part of her job is the First Amendment, um, I often feel that sometimes businesses use it
Mm.
as a way to get around, as Emily said, the frameworks that they've created. Um, and did that come up at all for you in the committee, Emily?
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's true. I think that's very true. And something that I also noticed that within this process and other bills, especially dealing with small businesses, that technically speaking, especially at the federal level, a small business is can have, I think it's up to 500 employees.
Yeah. Wow.
Which is a
Technically,
huge business in Vermont.
Yeah.
right. And so and having the the mechanism be based around total employees, that doesn't, count for low employee organizations that also make lots of money. So and then the ability for many of these larger corporations to spin off parts of their network into small businesses to capture a lot of the benefits. And they do that and hide behind actual small businesses, which
Hmm.
Vermont is made up largely of.
Mm.
That is a good point. That sounds like another conversation we have to have at some point.
Oh yeah, I'd be
Worth
happy
having.
to.
Thank you, Emily. Anything else on the data privacy bill before we head back to the big ed bill?
Um, I guess I would just point out, and I'm sure Wendy talked about this in terms of the safety stuff, but like we heard some really truly harrowing, like actual on the ground harm that was created with some of these processes and tools, where young people were being kind of filtered and filtered to predators, older individuals experiencing real world harm, and then not to mention just the amplification of bullying, which we spent the better part of 25 years talking about, and this has actually made it more, it's made it worse. It's exacerbated the issue. So um, it's important that we have these issues, or these protections and provisions. And hopefully going forward, we can also deal with, the adults that are on the internet and deal with some of the landscape and the divisiveness that we deal with in the country, which is largely fomented by social media.
Mhm.
I just can I say one thing on it, Olga?
Please.
Uh, I think also Emily, I want to thank you for the work on that. And I think that the the data privacy bill and the phone free schools bill, they sort of pair very nicely as two pieces of legislation that passed this session that I think are really responsive to Vermont kids and to what I will take my lumps for this. I would say it's like pretty bipartisan. Like,
Mhm.
uh, not everybody, especially on data privacy, but like, I think that if you were to talk to a lot of Vermonters, party aside, about the way that social media and online presence harms kids, and the way that phones impacting education for children in Vermont, if you were to talk to most Vermonters, they would probably agree around at least broadly those areas on how they're impacting our kids. And so I'm really proud of those two pieces of legislation that came out of this session being responsive, bipartisan, and really working towards just protecting Vermont kids and helping them. And I just wanted to like kind of bring those two pieces together because I think that they are connected in some ways, and they are thinking forward, and they're putting Vermont as a pretty forward thinker on these issues and out in front of the pack, which I think I'm very proud of.
Thank
Yeah,
you
thanks
very
for that
much.
too.
I'm sorry, Emily, I cut you off. What?
Oh, and thanks, Ian, for mentioning phone free school. That was a really critical piece as well, and it
Yeah.
links back into our education conversation.
Yeah.
Hmm. Well, yes. Thank you, Emily. The Ed bill got a lot of focus this session, and I have a feeling it's one of those bills because it was so encompassing. Everyone sort of went to one part of what concerned them. I'm thinking of readers and citizens. Were they concerned about the districts? Are they concerned about independent schools? Are they, and that's where they focused. Um, but we know it's a much more in-depth piece than that. So Zahn, you were saying earlier just how broad and encompassing it was, and then Ian, you so beautifully, stacked the layer cake of all the different layers and pressures that were on this bill. What do you think is crucial for people to understand about it right now?
It might not do anything.
Okay.
I think it's crucial to understand. I think it's really crucial for Vermonters to know that there are like a ton of steps between where we are now and it actually accomplishing what it's going to accomplish, and a bunch of off ramps and ways that this could not accomplish anything. And there's like a ton of battles that are going to have to be fought between where we're sitting here and where we are 6 years from now. And I have no idea where those are going to go. But like there have been other bills that the legislature have passed around a lot of different things where they sound really sparkly and exciting or controversial and transformative that don't do anything at all because
Mm.
they have these built-in things. So I think it's like important to note that. And if Zahn or Emily disagree with me on that, I would be happy to, battle it out. But that's my impression, at least from reading the bill. Um,
I wouldn't disagree with you at all. I think what I would say that just to add to it, if there's since we're only looking at one thing, is part of the reason that this bill was even undertaken and looked at this point is that at this moment in time, our education system is inconsistent with our own law.
Mm.
So it really should not be moving forward. Our system as it currently is should not be moving forward. And this bill, as rich and complicated and timeline oriented as it is, offers us an opportunity to potentially get it right. and I think that ad. It may end up doing nothing, but it also might make a real difference in the end if we're able to get all the battles worked out.
Hmm.
And Zahn's the law that Zahn's referencing is our Constitution.
Yes.
So it's not a little law. It's the Constitution of Vermont. The current education system is not in compliance. We're violating the Constitution based on our inability to provide equitable, equal education for every Vermont child. And so the status quo is unconstitutional.
Hmm.
And then not to mention obviously like the tax issues, um,
Yeah,
which are
yes.
massive. And I guess I would say I agree with you both. My district also has like a very particular relationship with the state. We have, as you know, Olga may or may not have sued the state once or twice. So but we
We may have a reputation at the state level.
we may have a little bit of a reputation. I know I'm such a naughty. So, so I think also in some ways I am grateful that this bill did not like put down, real strong hammers. And actually one thing I was going to say earlier that I will bring up now is that I was very pleased to come in and realize that we have a system where the committees actually do review the laws that are on the books, and like they've been doing over the last like number of sessions a lot of cleanup work. And so that aspect of things of going back and reviewing and trying to refine, and it's in there. So we have a lot of work to do, and I will just go ahead and bring up our federal partners. And in some ways I'm happy that we didn't just start sticking things into the ground this year because of the uncertainty at the federal level.
Mm,
This
Yeah,
is gonna
I'll go along with what Emily just said and say that I'm actually grateful, as complicated as the vote was, and as whatever, I'm actually grateful that we have this ability to move forward on the books right now. I cannot imagine us trying to undertake the conversation as the federal picture changes as dramatically as it's going to. I don't think we would have been able to even have a conversation. So as tricky as it is for us to go forward, at least we have a framework by which we'll be able to go forward. And I think that that's actually monumental. And I
mhm,
think I hope that we can actually go then forward. I don't know what that looks like yet, but I am hoping we can move.
mhm,
yeah, no, I absolutely agree with that. I mean, I'm glad that education was such a hot button issue this year because I think in some ways it allowed us to prepare for what's coming down the pike.
mhm,
Yeah.
And I think it's going to be a hot button issue next year.
mhm,
Oh yeah.
There,
Yeah.
those off ramps and those decisions that Emily and Zahn are both right. Like, yeah, like based on the federal picture, but then also just on how momentous, gigantic this issue is. There's no way we're going to make all the decisions in an informed way that actually is the right decision. There's no way we're going to do it all in one session, anyways. But I just, those decisions and that work is going to start immediately. We're going to be considering work that's being done this summer and fall. We're going to be taking it up right away in the beginning of the next session. So, yeah, I think education is going to be a
I,
topic
can,
on everyone's minds for a while.
mhm. Yes, on.
Yeah. Could I just say a thing that it's kind of an overview picture? It's not related necessarily to this, but one of the things in the feedback that I've been getting from constituents and then also hearing, I hope that Vermonters would understand that the legislature is doing, I think, an incredible job of listening to every possible opinion and trying to figure out, at least considering it, not fitting it in. But I sometimes get feedback like, well, didn't the legislature think of this? Well, of course we thought of that. But it's very complex situation and very rich. And so I can't, it's hard for me to imagine that there's an idea out there that the legislature hasn't either heard and considered or hasn't already figured out on its own. Thinking through so many ideas and so many considerations to get where we are now. And I hope that that kind of continual foment will I don't want it to stop. So but I guess I would hope that our constituents would understand that we're here trying to consider as much as we possibly can. We're not driving this in a certain direction.
Hmm.
No, and they're just there's something that you don't really realize until you're in the room and dealing with these particular issues is that there are just 1,001 contingencies. There's just 1,001
Yes.
things that you have to be considering that you wouldn't have necessarily figured like thought of until you got the further details.
And
So
I would say that was definitely one of the ways that I got to really grapple with how complex of a state Vermont is. I like, I kind of understood going in, I'm going to be interacting with legislators from every corner of the state and they're going to have their own perspectives, but man, education was the way that I really, oh yeah, wow, this has to take into account so many different school districts and so many different individual needs and desires, and just and watching people who, yeah, voted differently on it than I did, who I, voted the same way on so many other things because the district they represent is just has a lot of different needs than mine does. 'Cause,
Hmm.
yeah.
Well, we're almost out of time, but what your conversation is reminding me of is just how much pressure is on schools right now, and how so many people just have different definitions of what education is, what it should be, what it should accomplish, that I'm not sure even how many folks were starting from the same page when you started working on this bill.
Yeah.
It's monumental, and then also to watch the shifts as it moved down the road, to watch the shifts in support and consideration, and individual legislators making decisions which way they're going to go. It was, yeah, it just does not stop being complex and fascinating.
Well, we will hopefully have more conversations ahead because I do love hearing all your thoughts on everything. We're a little bit out of time, but quickly, a quick lightning round. And I'll start with Ian because I know he has to leave first. Anything you want to leave listeners with?
Oh my gosh, that's really what am I gonna leave it? Oh, um, kind of branching off of what Zahn said. There's a lot of struggle and a lot of difficult decisions that were made in the session this year. But what I would want to leave listeners with is my own perspective that I'm really struck by how many passionate, well-meaning Vermonters are in the state government in many different capacities who may not agree on things, may not agree on a lot of things, but I don't know if I really met anybody there who wasn't in their heart working in a way that they thought was in the best interest of Vermont. And so I left the session feeling like, if we have that many people who are all working towards that common goal, then we're probably going to be able to accomplish almost anything. So I hope people can trust that there are a lot of really good people working at that level of government, and with just everything that's happening on the federal level, I hope that can give people a little bit of solace and confidence in at least the Vermont government.
Lon?
Great. Ian says it very well, of course. I would just say that I think we really are. The sense I have is that the legislature is there behind Vermonters, really working Vermonters. Yes, I know the media, the limited media we have in Vermont likes to focus, I think, on Republican, Democrat, this, that, party lines. And it does play into the picture at some level, but in another way, it's really about trying to get what's best for Vermonters, and you can really feel that in the room. And so that's exactly what I was going to say about going forward as we walk toward the federal uncertainty, still uncertainty for us. I hope that Vermonters can trust that there's a good group of people in the room.
Thank you. Emily?
Um, you both said it beautifully. I guess I would I would add that I agree. This actually, I would say, doing this job gives me a lot more hope than I would have ever imagined,
Mm.
especially during these turbulent times, like being able to be in the room with these good brains, lots of really good brains, working towards the common goal of Vermont. Do we have some organizational management stuff? Yes, but who doesn't? You know, but we really are a group of people, and there's something about coming to Vermont and kind of picking up the baton and taking your turn that I
Mhm.
really appreciate. And I would just encourage all the listeners and viewers to do that. If you're, I mean, if you're here, then you're obviously involved. But 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 if you have other ways that you'd like to get involved, don't be afraid and just jump on in. And the last thing I would just say is that you're all doing such a great job.
Yeah.
Thank you. Well, Emily, Zahn, Ian, so great to have you on the show today. The Montpelier Happy Hour is on WVEW LP Brattleboro every Friday at 2 p.m., rebroadcasted on Wednesday mornings and wherever you find your podcasts. Take care, everyone, and have a good weekend.
Thank you, Olga.